I broke my back in 2 places, smashed my left ankle, put my ankle bone through the underside of my foot. I have nearly died, often on camera, on a multitude of occasions.
Oh, this is utterly, utterly amazing.
Having my firstborn child for me changed everything in the most cliched way imaginable. But that nagging voice is still there, and it's still the reason why I keep pushing myself.
Never fear a storm.
Be ready to adapt.
The skill is staying true to ourselves.
Steve, welcome to High Performance.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me on.
Sometimes in life, the hardest, the most difficult moments are the ones that teach us the most valuable lessons. So would you kindly take us back to a moment that you faced death in Bhutan and tell us what it taught you?
Yeah, I think that I've probably faced death on camera, exposed to millions of people more times than anybody else in human history. That, though, is the time that I think I was closest. So to anyone that hasn't seen it, we were on an expedition in the Himalayas. We were leading the first descent of one of the last great undescended whitewater rivers in Bhutan, which is this absolutely magical Himalayan kingdom. It's an incredible place. The culture is phenomenal. People are extraordinary. It is more forested and protected than just about anywhere else on Earth. But it is also rent with these extraordinary cataracts that thunder down from the Himalayas to the lowlands, and they pass through rocky gorges that you just can't get into. We couldn't even fly drones into them to get a sense of where we were going to be going. And what we would do as we would go down in our kayaks would be that we would stop off every time we had a significant rapid ahead of us, and we'd scout it, we'd get a really good look at it and figure out what our route was going to be down through it. And then we were coming towards the end of one day. I think we'd done about 20 or 30 completely unrun rapids before in that day. We were tired, we were on the edge, we were, really ready to find camp. And we came to what was clearly a significant rapid. It was entrapped on either side by vertical rock faces, and we just couldn't scout it. There was no way of getting down around the rocks to get a look at what we were doing. Now, looking back at it, we should have aborted. We should have just found a way out of that situation. Instead, we decided to run it blind. And that was a big mistake, and it was a mistake that very nearly cost me my life. So first of all, my paddle partner, Sal Montgomery, who's an extraordinary first descent specialist and waterfall specialist, went down the rapid, thundered down, disappeared out of view, and then it was my turn to go. And as I paddled down, I saw the water just dropping off into nothing. And what you're supposed to do as you go over one of those is to really commit. Like anyone who does anything to do with extreme sports knows that if you go half-assed at something, something's going to go wrong. If you properly throw yourself at it, you're much more likely to succeed. Well, I kind of bottled out at the last second, went over this drop, and then got caught in this spinning whirlpool beneath it. And I battled over and over to try and right myself. I did about, 15, 20 Eskimo rolls, and then just was taken straight back down every time. And eventually I thought, right, well, this is it. I'm going to pull the ripcord. So I pulled myself out of the boat and went into the water. At that point, the water is glacial meltwater. So it's not much above 0 degrees. And it is highly aerated and spinning. So your buoyancy disappears. And I was just being dragged down to the bottom over and over again. The cold meant that all the air was going out of my lungs. I couldn't breathe. And I was coming back up and clawing for the rocks around the side, but just couldn't get a hold of them. And I was in there for 4.5 minutes. Underwater, yeah. So coming up every once in a while, and then straight back down again. And it was the longest 4.5 minutes of my life. I've had a lot of close calls in the past, but never that amount of time to process what was happening to me, to think, this is really bad. I'm drowning. I haven't got the wherewithal to get out of this myself. I can't swim out of this. I'm not going to pop out of it. I am done. Feel all the strength going out of my body and just knowing that I couldn't rescue myself. And that was when somehow, and I'm still not really sure how she managed to do it, Sal battled upstream against the rapids, got a line and threw it to me. And she had one shot, because if she hadn't hit me with that one line, she'd have had to redo the rope back in the bag and I would have been gone. Pulled me out, and then I just pinballed all the way down through all these rapids until I was hauled out further downstream. And I think the reason that it stuck with me more than any other one was that amount of time, to think about and process what was happening to me, to think about my little boy who had really only just been born that I would never get to see grow up, to think about my wife and this life that we planned together that wasn't going to happen, and also to feel like I've never felt this before, the strength sapping out of my body to a degree where I just couldn't do anything. I couldn't swim myself back up to the surface. I was finished. And it's a very, very powerful thing to know that someone has saved your life in the absolute, underlined in bold letters way that Sal did for me then. And I can say that every single thing that's happened in my life since then, including me having twins and all the other stuff, has been down to Sal. And it's great that on things like this, I get a chance to say thank you.
Wow, what a story. Can I just ask about the moment where you're realizing that you're going to die, right? Because I think that most people think your entire thought process and all your physical movements are totally consumed with trying to stay alive. So how much of, like, where are those thoughts about your family and your life in your brain? Where are they when you're trying to stay alive and you're trying to make decisions to get out of the water?
Yeah, I've thought about this often. Um, I I can compare it to one of the other very, very close calls that I had, which was a rock climbing fall back in 2011, where I broke my back in two places, smashed my left ankle, put my ankle bone through the underside of my foot. The fall itself, from about 30 feet up, I know scientifically would have taken a second and a half. And in that second and a half, I had time to see the leaves passing by me on the trees, to flash back through my life to so many of the things that had happened to me. And there's lots of suggested scientific reasons why that might happen. That adrenaline might quite literally make our brains process things faster, so time appears to slow down. That our brains are zipping back through our life history to try and find something that might save us in that instant, some little moment that could give us the clarity to act and in my case stunt my fall. And that was a second and a half. And in a second and a half, I did see my life flash before me. Well, in 4.5 minutes, your brain is just struggling to find anything it can to get you out of that situation. It's running through every single scenario it can find. It's running through all the training that you've done over the years, through all your experiences, through the different things that you've had that might possibly make you think, oh, what I need to do is to pull this particular ripcord and everything will be right. In this case, that didn't happen. And without Sal, I would not, absolutely without question, would not be sat here today.
So when did you get a chance to be able to make sense of it, though? I know you said you processed it in that 4.5 minutes, but I'm thinking about when you finally reached the shore, you reached safety. How was your reaction to that?
I think I came out and I was completely exhausted. I was total jelly. I could barely walk to the side. I had to be dragged out by my life jacket. That evening, I had a really bleak time. I drank pretty much an entire bottle of scotch to myself in my tent and just lay there, just kind of thinking, what on earth has just happened
Why
to me?
bleak? Because I would have imagined it's like euphoria. Like, I could have died today and here I am still.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. Not that night anyway.
Really? Why?
And I think, well, there was lots of reasons. I think the darkness had been very real, and it had really kind of etched itself into my brain to a certain degree. That's that real sense of this is how it all ends for me is something that didn't just evaporate and leave me kind of buzzing. In fact, I've never really had a sense of euphoria afterwards. You think that I would, but I really didn't have. The next thing was, I think that I kind of knew even then that I was going to have to continue, that if I got out and went, well, that's it for me, I'm done, that the expedition would be over. And, sitting here now, how ridiculous is that? Of course the expedition should have been over. Of course we should have just walked away. What was I thinking that I would be actually in that moment processing, well, I need to get back on this river tomorrow morning. I need to keep paddling or this whole expedition's over and all these people are not going to have anything to do. And I mean, now sitting here for the first time, I realize quite how ludicrous that is. Where does that pressure come from? Where does that sense that we should have to continue when I had nearly lost everything on that river? And actually, what did it mean? It was kind of nothing in the big picture. But almost immediately my brain was saying, you've got to finish this. You've got to get back in that river tomorrow morning.
You know who we all want to be? That person. The one who's meal prepping. They've got their organic grain bowls. They come in with their quinoa, all of that stuff. We know they're also getting a full 8 hours sleep, meditating before sunrise, never rowing with anyone, and just hitting it every time. But let's be real. Who has the time for that? Like me, you've probably got loads to juggle: kids, work, exercise, pretending that you've got everything together at the same time, and something has to give. And for me, traditionally, that was energy. And then I discovered Vitals by Heights. And these changed so much for me. Just 2 capsules, the job is done so fast. And then I know for the rest of the day, my irons, my B vitamins, my immune system's being looked after. I've got zinc for bone health, omega-3 and DHA for normal heart health. Honestly, the lot is packed into these golden little beauties. And as we see on the high performance shows so often, high performers aren't perfect. They've just worked out the smart things that make a difference. So why don't you do right by your brain, your body, and your health? Head to heights.com/Jake or enter the code HP20 at checkout for 20% off your first order.
I've always pressured myself in things that I don't think I'm particularly good at. I've always wanted to push myself to overcome things that I am not naturally adept at, whether that be in science. I find science very, very challenging. Well, my brain was kind of there like a little gremlin in the back of my mind, sort of saying, you need to get your science qualifications because you don't understand it. You don't really get it. And you're just completely, you're a fake, you're a fraud. You've got to make sure you do that. To running, I'm not a very natural runner. And so I found myself kind of like over and over again, kind of, you need to do some big runs. You need to start running over the mountains. You need to start all these things at which I am not good. I find myself pushing myself to try and be better at, and often failing. But the triumph when you succeed, when you beat it, there's nothing that can better that. It's so much better than succeeding at things at which you find naturally easy.
And have you thought about why you're the kind of person that needs to do the things you're not very good at, rather than just leaning into the stuff that you're already great at?
I don't know. I think that there is definitely a part of my personality that has that, what we hideously call imposter syndrome, that it is always wanting to prove that I am not the fraud that maybe I thought I was when I was a youngster, and that I'm still trying to do that now when I'm 52 years old is perhaps a little sad. You'd kind of hope that at some stage you could gain a sense of equanimity and kind of just a little bit more happiness in all the things that I've done, and be a little bit more at ease with that. I'm still not.
But that sounds quite a cruel term to describe yourself as, that inner voice, to use the term fraud.
I think it is cruel, but in some ways that cruelty, that judgment of myself is one of the things that has driven me over the years, and that is still driving me now. Even as my body is falling apart and I clearly should be, wearing carpet slippers and being much more sensible about my life. It's still there. That nagging voice is still there, and it's still the reason why I keep pushing myself.
But that must have originated somewhere. Like, where do you think that first phrase, or the first time you heard that phrase?
I mean, I think it would probably go all the way back to school. I didn't have particularly good time at school. Didn't enjoy myself. Had quite a hard time with my schoolmates. I think I knew the kind of things that I loved in life, the things that made me happy, the things that fulfilled me, and I could never have shared those with the people that I was at school with. I went to, quite a robust, comprehensive school, and if I'd gone in and let people know that at the weekend I've been out bird watching and looking at birds' eggs and nests and watching the hatchlings fledge, I would have been beaten black and blue. And so I spent most of my school years pretending to be someone completely different, and someone that I absolutely was not. And whether it's something that has persisted since then, I don't know.
Damien, with one question, has linked this feeling that you have in your 40s and 50s about being a fraud with the fact that you were walking into school every day as a teenager and you were having to be a fraud as a kind of self-preservation method.
Yeah.
And here it is still lingering all these years later.
I wonder if it is that. If it is that, that is really, really frightening, because I kind of feel like I am done and dusted with the 14, 15-year-old that I was and have been for a very, very long time. But if that's still lurking somewhere in the back of my subconscious, that's pretty scary. I need to get rid of that, don't I? I need to address this
Well,
better.
that's an interesting question, though, whether you do, because yes, we kind of have this image that you shouldn't carry any kind of baggage, right? Because it has a cost. But look at all the things that you've done in your life, including being at the bottom of a Whitewater rapid in Bhutan. That's what you do when you're trying to prove yourself, when you feel that you've got something unfulfilled inside you, when you have that kind of inner fire in your stomach. Like, those are the things you end up doing. So in some ways, maybe it's the most valuable thing that you possess, is this desire to prove yourself wrong.
It might be, but at the same time, I think I could really do with being able to celebrate the successes a bit more and get a bit more out of them. You know, talking about that Bhutan expedition, that was one of 20 world first expeditions that we did in the space of about 2.5 years. And any one of those should be enough for me to revel in for the rest of my life. But instead, I finish it and I'm instantly on to the next one. I haven't gained the proper amount of satisfaction from doing one of those expeditions. And to a certain extent, that's a waste, isn't it? You know, because there are so many stories, so many lessons, so many things that I could share from any one of those single expeditions. Is that any greater from me having done 20? Probably not, actually. Probably I would be better to sit down and process and enjoy any one of those experiences a bit more, rather than having this ceaseless desire to just keep on going, keep on doing new things, keep on achieving. It's got to end somewhere, and let's just hope that it's not somewhere bad.
But who are you trying to prove yourself to?
I mean, I cannot think of any single person or thing that I'm trying to prove myself to. It is purely self-driven, and it's something that has always been that way. I've told the story before of an expedition that I was doing in the Himalayas with some friends of mine, and we took about 5 weeks to try and make an ascent of this quite serious mountain near Everest. And it was really intense. It was really full on. We all got a little bit scared, a little bit overwhelmed, and we turned back at a critical point when a couple of little tweaks could have seen us to the summit. And I had a photo of the summit ridge blown up and put on my wall in front of my bed, so that for about 10 years, every single time I woke up in the morning, the first thing I would see would be that photo, and would be the reminder of how it felt to turn back when I could have pushed on and gained the glory. And I wanted it to be a not so much an inspiration as a kind of nagging sense of what failure feels like and what turning back when you shouldn't feels like. And isn't that a bit messed up looking back at it now? I mean, I thought at the time that I was being really clever, that I was using psychology to trick myself and to drive myself on to achieving more. But wasn't I actually completely tormenting myself in a needless way?
Well, just as you said it there, the idea that came into my head, I don't know if you're familiar with that. There's a phrase called goal idiocy, and it was written by a guy that looked at climbers scaling Everest, and the amount of people that have almost set the goal of, I need to get to the summit of Everest, and then died on the summit when all the evidence was like, turn back, this isn't healthy for you, you're likely to perish. And the number, and that was where the phrase came from.
Goal idiocy, I love it.
Yes. So when you described it, I'm listening to somebody that's actually making a smart decision of whatever your rationale would have been, you've done it because it's the right reason. And yet you're using it to beat yourself up for it.
Yeah. So we call that summit fever as well. And it's a real thing. It's a very real thing. You know, that sense of I've just got to get to that summit, metaphorical or literal, and not seeing beyond it and not seeing the consequences, or not seeing, you know, in mountaineering, the very real sense that getting down is harder than going up. So, you know, if you completely rinse yourself getting to the top, then you are stuffed. Can I just say this is probably the best and most frightening therapy session I have had in my entire life. I'm digging up demons I haven't talked about before.
But thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
The point is, though, it works for you, right? To set yourself these targets, to almost punish yourself to the point of achieving, it's successful. But you've already said it yourself. It has to stop one day.
Yeah.
So have you actually thought about that? Because at 53,
52, yeah.
52, you're an awful lot closer to the it has to end one day than when you were 22.
Yeah. I know. And where it ends is a question that I've been asking myself for a long time. You know, I've been doing a kids wildlife series. We were talking about this, just before, since 2003, I've been making kids television programs, and every single significant milestone, I've said, well, no one's going to be wanting to see me do this in my 30s. No one will be wanting to see me do this in my 40s. Nobody's going to be wanting to see me do this in my 50s. And yeah, I'm still making Deadly 60 now. It's got to end somewhere. How does it end? How do I move on? What happens next? It's kind of been the huge question in my life for the last decade, and I don't know the answer. And every time I feel like I've discovered the solution and what's going to be next, something else happens that means that I just drop back into the old familiar groove. And one reason is that I really enjoy it. Another is that I clearly get something from the achievements and from the big ticks in the boxes, whether I like it when I put it in that sense or not. And so I don't know. I don't know where it ends. And while I feel like some of these things that I use to motivate myself and some of the lessons that I get from them would be very useful if, for example, they were in sport, where the consequences are glory and excellence and excitement, and the negatives are maybe not quite getting where you want to get to. Whereas in what I do, there's less glory from the attainment, but the possible negative outcomes are quite literal death. So I probably need to get better at assessing all of this and figuring out the answer to that question. When does it end and what happens next?
I think earlier you said it has to end someday. Let's hope it doesn't end badly. Or so. Did you say
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. I mean, there are so many things that I've done over the years, and I am someone who continually risk assesses every single area of my life. And I, have come to the conclusion that the majority of things that I do, while they may appear to be dangerous, have been thought through and are always based on experience and knowledge and all of that other stuff. But there's no getting around the fact that, I have nearly died on a multitude of occasions and often on camera, very publicly. And, you know, I think I do need to think more about that, particularly now as I've, got 3 young kids and a lot of bigger responsibilities. And just to make sure that the needle is always nudging towards experience and away from the chaos of youth. Because, when you're in your 20s and 30s and you think you're utterly invincible and that nothing can bring you down, I think you've also got the physical capabilities, and I'm aware now that my physical capabilities are not what they were when I was in my 20s and 30s. So I need to be better at making sure my risk assessments are good.
But you are so experienced, so knowledgeable. You do your risk assessments. You know about summit fever. You now know about goal idiocy. But despite all of that, you're standing there looking at a whitewater rapid in Bhutan, and you go, well, we can't assess it. Let's go for it anyway.
Yeah.
I don't understand how you came to that decision.
Neither do I.
And whether actually, you can learn a lot from nearly dying under the water, right? And we can talk about the lessons you've learned and how that's changed how you feel about life. But surely you've changed how you make decisions after nearly killing yourself.
I hope so. I really do hope so. And I know that I've become a lot more rational now than I was 15 years ago, 20 years ago. But there are still things that I do that you could argue are kind of lunacy. The closest call that I think I've had with an animal was diving with Nile crocodiles in the Okavango Delta, and we were there for about 10 days, and we dived with, I don't know, maybe sort of 15 or 20 of these crocodiles, and the reasoning was that at that time of year, the water is very clear and very cold. And so the crocs that are underwater as so-called cold-blooded animals, they're chilled, they don't have a tremendous amount of energy. And so you can swim up and you can be kneeling alongside them underwater. This will be a 3-meter long crocodile, and they will completely ignore you, and they do. And, there is what appears to be no risk from that scenario. And it's been thought through, it's been risk assessed. And then coming towards the end of the trip, we came across this big male crocodile who's more like 4.5 meters long. His head is that wide and that long. And he'd possibly been out of the water basking, or maybe the fact that he was big made that he could maintain more heat than the smaller crocs. But he did not lie there and do nothing. He came straight at us underwater, swam in between my camera operator and I. We got this incredible image of this big ball of sand on the bottom and then the croc coming out of it and coming in between the two of us. You could toss a coin as to whether we lived or died in that moment. And every time we've replayed that in our heads, we've all gone, it was just pure luck, pure chance that no one got killed that day. And in the exact same scenario, people have been killed. And yet, the last series of Deadly 60, I was back in diving with crocodiles again and going through the same processes, saying, oh, well, these ones are smaller and, they're purely fish feeding species. And so therefore it's going to be fine. And the images of crocs just like swimming over my head while I've got the camera like this. So do
you not get the fear then after what's happened previously?
I have to say I didn't. I don't know. I think that, one of the things working with animals is that the old adage about animals being able to sense fear is probably the number one maxim that I still use for my animal encounters now, because it is the truest thing. Animals can absolutely sense fear and they react negatively to it. So if you are calm and confident, if you are making a big image underwater or on land, you are far less likely to have a negative reaction from an animal. The worst thing you can do with any kind of animal, particularly a predator, is to run or to show any sign of stress or weakness. That is what triggers their predatory sense.
But let's just go back a step before that though, Steve. How do you control your fear to be able to convey that sense of confidence?
So it depends what I'm working with. If I'm going into a situation with an animal and I am nervous or frightened, and there is a an easy out, then I'll take it, because putting yourself into that situation if you are scared is a bad idea. And now, having been doing this for 30 years, I know what that line is. Working with things like sharks.
So how does fear show up for you then?
Fear, is something that if you have it, you can't really mask it, particularly not to an animal. Because first of all, your heart rate's going to increase, your breathing is going to increase. Underwater, that's transmitted through the water by ripples, and sharks and crocodiles, they are absolutely honed to picking those symbols up. In the air, the fact that you move differently, the fact that you hold yourself in a different way, the fact that you are going to be exuding chemicals through your sweat, which they can sense and smell, all these things you cannot hide, you cannot mask. So you have to not be scared. And I know that's easier said than done. But I guess an example would be working with highly venomous snakes. If you work with highly venomous snakes for a long time, then you learn there are simple rules that you can live by, a striking distance that you can stay outside of, where you are safe. And if you do that, then there is no reason to be scared. And likewise, working with sharks. When I work with sharks, I work in clear water. I don't do it at dusk and dawn. I make sure that I have the right species, the right individuals, and that there is a set amount of the right kind of bait around. And if you do that, then it is near as damn it safe. And I know that, and I am calm and confident. And if I'm not calm and confident, then I shouldn't be there.
What's the one animal that when it gets mentioned, you immediately feel a little rise of fear?
Hippos by far. So I've talked there about snakes, sharks, crocodiles, all of them animals that are so-called cold-blooded and are very predictable. They can catch you out, of course they can, but they are, for the most part, animals that you can learn the rules, stick to the rules, you're going to be okay. Hippos are a large, intelligent, warm-blooded mammal that are not predictable in any sense. You could work with hippos your whole life and you still don't know what they're going to do next. They are aggressive, they're territorial. The females, when they're looking after their calves, are very dangerous. The males, when they are feeling grumpy, are incredibly dangerous. And they're in the water, usually completely brown, murky water where you can't see them. And therefore, if you're there in a boat, in a kayak, on a paddleboard, or God forbid, underwater, they are the absolute boss of you. They can move faster than you can. They can pop up alongside you. We're not expecting it.
How do they attack?
Their teeth are insane. So the tusks can be as long as my arm, and they are self-sharpening. They sharpen against the teeth from the upper jaw. So they are, they're as sharp as a sword. The other thing is on land as well. I've been saying for a long, long time, hippos can run as fast as an Olympic sprinter because that's what the record books say, but I never believed it. And then last year we were filming in Zambia and I saw one at night get spooked and it went off like there's no doubt that it would have outpaced Usain Bolt, and it did it through waist deep water and then stampeding over rough ground at insane speeds. If you were chased by a hippo, you would have zero chance, absolutely no chance. If you were between a hippo and the water and it wanted to get into the water, it's going through you. So yeah, they're the one animal that exceeds expectations.
We've talked a lot about fear and what drives you and fears for the future as well as fears for what you're doing now. But there's also a magic to what you do because you have to operate in a space that 99% of people are not operating in. So can we talk about how you sort of optimize your brain to operate like this and what it feels like when you know that you're getting the absolute most out of what's in here?
That's a wonderful question. And I think that, probably the answer to all of the quandaries that I've talked about up to this point is the wonder and the joy I get from this job. There is nothing that comes close to the absolute saturated joy of holding in your hand a species that is new to science, knowing that yours are the first eyes ever to see it, that comes with striding across a summit ridge to get onto a pinnacle that no human being has stood on before, looking out to the view, knowing yours are the first eyes to ever see it in that way, swimming into a subterranean cavern and your light illuminating darkness that has never before seen light, and knowing that every single stalagmite and stalactite is being seen by your eyes for the very first time. That ecstasy, that euphoria, if I could bottle that, I would be a trillionaire.
Can you describe it?
I think, sometimes even just the joy of waking up in a morning on an expedition and opening up your tent and looking outside at a beautiful view and thinking, I don't know what's going to happen today. It's going to be something amazing, but I don't know what it's going to be, is joyous. It's life affirming. It makes all the effort that you've taken to get to that point worthwhile. And it's incredible. And maybe it is that I'm searching for. Maybe that is the reason why I'm still pushing myself to do these things over and over again. And rather than taking the time that I should be taking to get the most out of the lessons I'm learning, to be sharing the stories that I've had, I'm always ticking on to the next one. Maybe it's a kind of addiction. Maybe it is, the incredible release of hormones that I get from that magic moment when you see something new that I think makes it so special. And I guess if I kind of process that from a scientific perspective, that desire to discover, that urge to seek out new things is one of the things that has made us as a species so successful. It's one of the reasons why human beings are at the top of the tree right now, is because we look at the world as something that needs explaining. We look for new things and want to figure out how they work and figure out how they process. And that is the thing that almost defines our success. And I have had the opportunity to do that over and over and over again in my life. And it just feels amazing.
It sounds like there's echoes as you're talking there, Steve, of an interview that we did with a brain surgeon who spoke about the psychology of awe. When he looks inside somebody's head, the sense of awe that he gets leads him to be more and more curious. What has awe taught you about the world that you think you still use or that you pass on to your 3 children?
I think that, first of all, I need to listen to that episode for sure. That is a wonderful way of describing it, because awe is awe is the greatest drug out there. It really is. You know, to stand um, below the Angel Falls in full cascade and look up at them, having just descended on a line alongside them, and know that you're looking at one of the greatest wonders of the world, and it's just you stood on that little pinnacle looking up at it. It's something absolutely overwhelming, and it is, as you're intimating, something that I desperately want to be able to share with my kids. And whether that be at, last night, staring down a microscope into the compound eyes of a dragonfly for the first time, and seeing them, accentuated all in all their tens of thousands of lenses of glory.
What, with your children?
Yes. Yeah.
What a lovely thing to do.
Those little moments where you see eyes light up and potentially the naturalists of the future being born are really special. And it's awe that does it. Awe and wonder is the thing that we can use to lead young people towards the things that are going to give them the best possible life. And I think that with a natural world, we have an absolute overdose of that. There are so many things in the outdoors, in beautiful landscapes, in wildlife and animals that can do just that, that can just leave your jaw on the floor with awe.
So will you tell us how you maintain that sense of curiosity for anyone listening to this, about how can they tap into some of those principles of awe in their everyday lives?
I mean, I don't know if it's universal, the kind of sense of awe that I have with the natural world. If it is, then I would say that is the perfect way to go, because it's so big and so infinite, and because you can go from, like I say, the staring at a gigantic mountain, to the teeny tiny, to staring down a microscope at a dragonfly's eye. And that, to me, is infinite in its possibilities. There's at least 20 million different species on the planet. You could never know everything about them. And there is always some little element of discovery. And sometimes it's in the familiar, it's in things that you see every day. And in other times, it's in something that you have to work really, really hard for. So that gives you so many possibilities for achieving that awe, that wonder, which just kind of sets everything right in life and gives everything purpose. So if anyone out there is looking for their thing, try nature and see if it works for you. You tend to think that from a scientific perspective that it would make sense that it does, because we have hundreds of thousands of evolutionary history where wanting to learn about the things around us has been very important, and it's been something that keeps us alive. So I would think that a significant amount of people have that same thing in them that I do. They just probably don't, spend as much time and effort into evoking it as I do.
And when it comes to parenting, how do you encourage your kids to find the thing that they love and not kind of overpower them with loving the thing that you love?
Yeah, that is such a big question, isn't it? Because, both myself and my wife's a, 4-time Olympic athlete, and I'm someone who's obsessed with nature. And it was the first conversation we had before we had kids, was we have to make sure that we don't try and push our kids into doing our thing. First of all, because I've done enough work with young people to know that the thing you push them towards is the thing they're most likely to reject. But at the same time, we want to make sure that it's available to them. We want to make sure that they have the experience that Helen and I have offered to them as a resource should they want it. And the best thing I can do really is to try and make it cool, is to try and make it something that they actively enjoy, that they absolutely don't feel they're being forced into or led by the nose into, because then it's something that's always going to be, oh, that's dad's thing, we don't like that. And right now, they're at a great age. The twins are 5, Logan is 6. And so we still have an opportunity to sow the seed, to make it awesome, but then to let them make their own choices, which they will ultimately have to do.
Can we talk about your marriage too? For those that don't know, Helen Glover, Olympic rower, amazing athlete, incredible woman, you'd be the first to say. What does a marriage look like when it's an Olympian and a kind of adrenaline-obsessed adventurer?
It's a weird marriage from everybody's kind of out external perspectives.
Why?
Well, because we spend a lot of time apart. We both have very disparate, all-consuming objectives. We're both incredibly driven people, but we're also both essentially homebodies who are really desperate to be the best possible parents we can. And those things can sometimes come together into a beautiful synthesis that enables us to give things our kids that almost, without wanting to sound smug, no other parents can. But at the same time, we're very aware that it can put an enormous amount of pressure on the kids. That there's also a lot of time where they don't have both of us; they have one or the other of us, and that there are an awful lot of things going on in our lives that create a huge amount of stress and energy that 5-year-olds don't necessarily understand. So it's a battle. It's a battle to make sure that we give them as many positives as we can, that we give them as much of the experience as we have. But, can you imagine for our youngsters if they were to start getting into sport and they would start feeling, but your mum's Helen Glover.
Mm.
Your mum is one of the most successful Olympians this country has ever seen. How are you ever going to live up to that? That could be desperate for a kid. And I think figuring out ways that we can kind of shield them from that while still allowing them to have Helen's expertise, it's not a challenge we take lightly, and we're not going to always succeed at it.
And what have you found?
I think that it's about that balance between providing the inspiration without putting in too much pressure. And we're also very, very aware that we're still at an early stage with this. We're still at the 5-year-old, 6-year-old stage where they're still quite malleable, where they still want to be with us. They still listen to us. They still, respect us. And that isn't always going to be the case. We're very aware of that. I've got plenty of friends who have kids who are teenagers, and, even the most high achieving of them, there is going to be a day where they don't care about mum and dad anymore. So we're enjoying these halcyon days and trying to get the best out of them we possibly can.
Can I ask you about the languages of love between you and Helen? It's the work of a guy called Gary Chapman, who talks about all couples have like a way that they like to express affection to each other. It might be time, it might be words, it might be physical gestures. Like, how do you two connect with each other then, given that you're both competitive animals, but you do spend so much time apart?
Yeah, I'm a very, very romantic person, and quite emotional, and I do lots of full on romantic things for Helen to try and make sure that she always knows that I'm thinking about her and I'm on her side, and that I want to champion her to do and achieve everything that she can.
What do you
And
do?
oh God, all sorts. Nothing that is going to endear me to any of your listeners.
You never know who listens to this. If Helen's a listener,
Well,
endears.
Helen knows all too
Yeah.
well, but she'll be the first person to be reaching for the sick bucket. I think, I mean, it's really important that those things that you start off with early in the relationship that you keep doing as much as possible. And so, Helen has had a massage every single night that we've been together in the last 12 years.
That's
And
nice. Who's
as
the
a-
masseuse?
That's me. Yeah, I just caught. It's this
Can I
big
come in?
Dave from two houses down. Yeah, I mean, she as a sports person who has endless aches and pains. She's always needing a back rub or a foot rub or something like that. And something as simple as just making sure that every single evening I do that, and I never say no is an important thing. I still write her poems and send her cards and photos and leave little surprises and boxes of chocolate in the places that she's last looking for them, and do all those things to check in as much as possible.
And did the way that you speak to her, look after her, and love her, and the way that you parent and love your kids change at all after you really thought you were going to die in Bhutan?
Yeah, for sure. I think that I came back, first of all, just very glad and very joyous that I was still alive, and there was still going to be things that I could do, and I definitely had an enriched sense of appreciation of life after that. I don't think though that it was as big of an impact on my perception as fatherhood had been, and that had been maybe a year and a half before that moment in Bhutan, and that had been such a sea change in my life and such a change in the way that I perceived everything in life, that it was always going to overwhelm something as comparatively trivial as nearly drowning. Having my firstborn child for me changed everything in the most cliched way imaginable. I felt like I've been someone who'd been a real searcher my whole life, who'd been looking for the purpose, the meaning of life. Why are we here? Then I had kids and I went, oh, well, that's why we're here. It's not some massive, grand, self-serving purpose. It's something as simple as the kind of thing that, pretty much everyone does. But all of a sudden realizing that now everything is invested in them, is a powerful and important thing.
Love that. Can we talk about the amazing physical shape you're in? For people that are listening to this on their podcast player and they don't get the full Steve Backshall experience because we get the pecs and the lats and the guns and the abs. I mean, you look in amazing shape for someone in his early 50s.
Looks can be deceiving.
Come on, Steve. What is the secret to looking like you are? What are the behaviors that you would love people to think about adopting?
So the first thing to say is that I have had a lot of serious injuries in the past, and that if I don't train every day, and that might be as simple as a bit of yoga or some weights, some calisthenics, whatever. If I don't train every day, I start to break down really quickly now, and it's not surprising. I broke my back in 2 places. I've smashed up my leg. I've had countless operations to try and get myself working again. If I don't take really good care of myself, then it starts to become very obvious very, very quickly. So I do try and train every day, and I try and make sure that wherever I go and whatever I do, I take with me a set of rings, a TRX, a skipping rope, maybe an ab roller, and I find the time, I make the time to do something every single day. And one of the things that I think I've really learned from Helen is that something that Helen was amazing at, particularly in the Tokyo Olympic year when it was post-pandemic. She had 3 kids under 2 years of age, and she was still smashing it to a degree where she could go out and become the first, female rower to go to the Olympics having had kids. And the reason she did it was not so much the getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning, going out for a 2-hour row, even though she had no sleep the night before because she'd been breastfeeding 2 kids. The reason she did it was that every time she had 5 minutes or 10 minutes spare, she'd be down on the ground doing a core session, or she'd be doing chins. And you'd think, or I thought before that, if I got 5 minutes, I haven't got time to train. I've only got 5 minutes. What's the point in that? You're not even get your heart rate up. For Helen, it was like, no, I'm taking that 5 minutes. I'm going to do something with it. And actually, over the course of a day, those 5 minutes would add up to half an hour. And over the course of a week, they've added up to 3 hours or 4 hours on top of her normal training. And actually, you absolutely can do a really decent ab workout in 5 minutes if you've got it, if you want to. And I started becoming better at doing that, at taking those small moments of time and using them. And they add up, and they really add up. And if you've got a really, really busy day and you only have 5 minutes and you use that 5 minutes, the difference it makes not just to your physicality, but to your mental feeling about how that day has gone is stratospheric. If I come to the end of a day and I haven't done anything physical, I feel low, I feel heavy, I feel a bit disappointed in myself. If I've done 5 minutes, if I had 3 minutes and I spent it doing something physical, I feel proud of myself.
So what would you do in those 5 minutes?
So for me, it depends whether I'm at home, whether there's a gym available, or whether I'm quite literally in a featureless environment. Like I've just come back from an Arctic expedition where we were out on the Arctic tundra or the Arctic sea ice for the whole expedition. So there wasn't a tree to hang the rings off or to get the TRX on. I had nothing. And I simply did burpees and jumping squats and, doing lunges all the way through the snow and shadow boxing. Doesn't matter. It absolutely doesn't matter as long as you do something. And a lot of that is psychological as well as physical.
Go on, explain what you mean by that.
Well, so I think that if I've got a really good gym available, I can go and I can do 45 minutes of a hardcore physical workout with every bit of modern equipment you can use. What I have mentally at the end of that is probably not as much as if I've had a tree outside my hut in Africa and I've thrown my rings over it and I've spent 10 minutes doing skin the cats, because I know that it's taken more willpower to do that. And in doing that, I've got a little bit of mental strength out of that. I've proved a little bit about my own resilience from the fact that I've made myself do it when most other people wouldn't. And that, I think, is in some ways as important as the physical stuff is.
When, obviously, I was on Children's BBC when you first started making, children's BBC shows, and I remember you would come in and you would be full of energy and enthusiasm and love for the
And look at
natural
me now.
world. And now you're all browbeaten and I couldn't wait to see you again, because I was like, I love the sort of, like, we talk often about being the spark of light in the room, and I think you are the spark of light in the room. But what's really interesting for me here is that I think sometimes when someone is the spark of light, when they are the enthusiast, when they are the one that's doing the thing that they love, you assume they're just on this linear path of happiness. But I think the biggest revelation for me is that kind of the fact you can do the things you love, but sometimes the things that drive you to do the things you love are a lot darker than the things that you love. Is that a fair reflection of the conversation we've had, actually?
I think I'm beginning to realize through this conversation that is absolutely true. Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I mean, I reckon that I have always been someone who has been searching for meaning, always been someone who's been searching for purpose, been driven by a desire to do everything amazing I possibly can without necessarily understanding where that drive comes from. And I absolutely should spend more time processing, more time figuring out what it is that psychologically drives me and everyone, and also more time kind of breaking down and understanding and appreciating some of the things that I've done in the past and trying to find out what the lessons are. Because if I don't do that, then what was the point of them, really? It's fair enough when I'm 24, 25 and you're, running up a mountain to feel good about yourself. But I'm 52 now and I've got 3 kids, and there are so many things that I could learn and share from those experiences. Maybe it's time to just stop having my foot on the accelerator every second of every day and start having more time to just try and figure out what it's all been about.
So why don't you do that?
I mean, I think that a lot of it is down to pure logistics and purely the self-employed mentality. I have been someone that's been working in television and the media for a very long time, and I still have that desire to grab every job that's thrown my way. And I think that I might be wrong, but in our area of the media, you're kind of either hot or you're not. And I've got a lot of people that I have huge respect for that are better naturalists than I am, who are nowhere in the media now because they took their foot off the gas at the wrong time. And that's always kind of there in the back of my brain. That sort of, if you don't take every job and if you don't throw yourself into every single scenario, then somebody else is going to do it for you. And I'm probably at that cusp now where I could go from, having more work than I can do to having none in a heartbeat. And so there's that there. I think probably, a lot of people probably assume that because I talk in quite a nice way that I come from money and that I've, always had it easy, silver spoon, loads of cash. In actual fact, I've been a CBBC presenter for most of my career. And as I'm sure you know, that does not come with vast wealth. And I don't come from money. So I'm comfortable now, but I still have the wolves of paying the rent, calling over my shoulder. And what I need to do is to just do that. Maybe if I gain nothing else from doing this podcast, it's that sense of it's time to start, taking a bit more time for the family, for the kids, and for just figuring stuff out. I am taking this summer off. I'm taking this summer off to just have a couple of months of family time and, being a better dad.
So you've bought some things for us to have a look at.
I have, yes.
Show and tell with Steve Backshall.
Yes, I bought bits from 3 of the most venomous creatures on the planet. So first of all, I'm going to give you that.
What is that?
What do you think?
Well, I think it's a part of initially I thought it was like an animal in itself, but I think it's part of a snake because of the...
Yeah.
I wouldn't know.
Yeah, no, you're spot on.
So is this the skin that it sloughs?
No, well, yes and no. So this is a rattlesnake's rattle.
Oh.
So it is.
Wow.
It is the noise. Yeah, exactly. That noise is the one that every animal hears, knows is trouble, whether they've heard it before or not. It is vibrated with the fastest moving vertebrate muscle in the world, hundreds of times a second, to create the buzz sound, which intensifies as animals get closer and they see it as a threat. Therefore, they leave the rattlesnake alone. It's formed by cusps of hard skin, which, as it sheds, gets bigger and longer. So older rattlesnakes classically have a longer
And is it hard
rattle.
skin that's inside there that's making the...
Those cusps, they're called buttons,
Yeah.
are formed of keratin, which is hardened skin, hardened scales.
Right.
And
And what's inside making the... Or is it just
the,
this rattling
the
against
cusps
itself?
sit on top
Oh,
of
is
each
that what
other
it
like
is?
that, and they all vibrate together. And if you watch it in super slow-mo, it's like ripples go down the length of the rattlesnake's tail. The thing I find amazing about it is that a baby animal that lives in the rattlesnake's world that has never heard a rattlesnake's rattle before knows it means trouble and leaves the animal alone. So an awareness for that meaning danger has evolved to be
So-
in the back of brains of everything that lives in the Americas.
So can the snake? So does it only do that to warn you off, or so
Yeah.
it can slither without making that noise?
If it's approaching its prey, I mean, they're mostly sit and wait predators, so they don't do that a huge amount. But if it's approaching its prey or if it's just moving, you don't hear that at all.
Right.
But if it chooses to make it vibrate, the buzz, that rattle sound, can be heard from meters away. And as you get closer, the buzz gets louder. So you know
Wow.
that you're getting close to something sketchy.
Nice. Right, what else have we got?
We've got this. So this was a full-sized polystyrene cup, which we put on the outside of a submersible on a deep dive off the coast of Tenerife.
That is so cool.
Isn't it? And so
Yeah.
all of the air gets squished out of it. So the full-size polystyrene cup gets down. So it's now like one that looks like it should be in a doll's house. The reason I brought this along is that on the particular dive that we did this, we found a new species of snapping shrimp. It's teeny tiny. It's about that sort of size, bright orange and bright white, completely new to science. And they named it after me, Backshall's snapping shrimp. Yes. Come on.
That's a win. That's a win right there. What else?
That's amazing.
So what else do we have? We have, this. This, but I tell you what, have a little guess. What do you think that is?
Okay. A little jellyfish.
It is. It's a
Is
little
it?
jellyfish, but it's a very special one. This is an irukandji. So an irukandji is the most venomous creature on the planet. Even though it's teeny tiny, it's a kind of box jellyfish. They have the power to stop a human heart faster than any other animal. And the irukandji is interesting because if you get stung by one, you suffer from something called irukandjiism or irukandji syndrome, which comes with an overwhelming sense of dread, a feeling that the world is going to end. People have been said to throw themselves off the side of boats, to do all kinds of crazy things once they've been stung by an irukandji because they just feel like something
will they die?
terrible is happening. So I know quite a few people who've been stung and they have survived. There are also people who are killed all the time by them and other kinds of box jellyfish. The most amazing thing about this is that I did a live show at Sydney Opera House and someone came up to me afterwards and gave me that as a present. So other people get given flowers, which I get given the world's most venomous creature.
They
in
know
a
you
jar.
well.
Yeah.
We've got some quick-fire questions to finish with.
Yeah.
What are the 3 non-negotiable behaviours that you think are most important in life?
Wow. Oh my gosh. Loyalty, generosity, and how can I put this? I want to say openness of heart. Just kind of willingness, openness.
Yeah. A vulnerability.
No, I wouldn't say that so much. I think being always willing to, I mean, this is going to go, instead of giving you one word, I'm going to give you like a thesis. But the ability to be willing to accept everyone and everything, to learn from every possible thing that's thrown your way, openness, just being open to every experience, I think is really important.
What advice would you give a teenage Steve?
I would say, forget about now. Life's going to be great. You know, these kids that you think are everything and their opinions matter, they're not in your life in 3 years' time. You'll never see them again. Don't worry about what they think. Actually, what you've got, the things that you know you love and that make you happy are going to give you a really, really good life. So just focus on them and screw everyone else.
I love that. What's the best bit of advice that you've ever been given?
Um, I think when I was a kid, one of my mum's main maxims was, if a job's worth doing, it's worth doing well. And I have kind of always stuck to that. I'm someone who does my research, who does everything 100%, throws myself into every task, or doesn't do it at all. And I think that is a really good way of doing things. I think that, a lot of the people that I admire the most, particularly in this industry, are people who are just like that. I can remember, I hope she doesn't mind me saying this, but I was promoting a book a couple of years ago, and I did 2 days of radio interviews. I'm sure you guys have done it, where you've been locked in those booths where you talk to every radio station all around the country, and half of them didn't know who I was, or couldn't pronounce my name, or asked me stupid questions. And then the next morning, I was on with Claire Balding, busiest presenter in the country. And she had not only read the book that I was promoting, but had read the previous 2 books before that as well. She asked me questions like you guys have that I've never even thought of before in my life, and really kind of probed into me as a person, and made me feel like I was the most important person in the world for a couple of hours. And I came out at the end of it and went, that's why you're Claire Balding, is because you are prepared to do the work that nobody else will, to prepare yourself. And I want to be like that. I want to be the person who's always best prepared.
If you could go back to one moment of your life, what would it be and why?
Oh, wow. My wedding day. Yeah, that was the happiest day of my life. I've had lots since with the kids, but Helen and I, we got married on a Cornish cliff top, not far from where her family are in Penzance. The sky was blue. Everybody that I love in life was there in one big tent on a cliffside, and I have never been happier.
Final question. Your one golden rule that you'd like to leave people thinking about for living their own high-performance life?
There is nothing that is going to get you so hard as the regret of not having done something or not having tried something. We learn so much more from our mistakes than we do from our achievements. So go for it. Try it, whatever it is. If you mess up, if you fail, then you're going to be a better person for it. But in a few years' time, if you haven't done it, that's the thing that's going to nag at you. That's going to be the thing that's back in the back of your brain going, you never tried that thing. You never gave it a go. So don't be in that position. Try it. If it fails, you're still going to gain and learn and grow.
Thank you so much, mate.
It's been an absolute joy. Thank you.
Loved it. Thank you so much. Really good, Steve.
You know what I really love? Sitting in this room, having the incredible conversations that you get to watch on High Performance. But something else I love is taking the lessons and the learnings from the likes of KSI and Arnold Schwarzenegger and Matthew McConaughey and all these other incredible guests we've had on High Performance, and taking them out to you, to your businesses, to your people. And whether it's sitting around a small group of 6 senior leaders or maybe in an auditorium with 2,000 or 3,000 staff members, myself and Damien just love helping you and your people get closer to your own version of high performance. And we've done it in Germany, in Dubai, in North America, in South Africa, you name it. We've traveled the world sharing our message of high performance. And if you'd love us to come and work with you and your business, all you have to do is hit the link in the description and we will be with you, getting you and your team closer to high performance.